Welcome to Good Friday. I'm really hot right now. The mic, not the looks. Heard my wife say, yeah. I'm like, all right, that's cool. If there are any other amens, we would have had other issues going on. Welcome to Good Friday. This is one of my favorite moments of the year. And I love being able to have these times together. And so I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for those joining with us online, those that are just getting out of work, that are watching, those that just were unable to join us today. We just want to welcome you as we celebrate the goodness of Jesus on the cross. It was about a month, maybe 2 months ago, I was picking my son up from work, and we were driving in from downtown. He wanted something to eat, so we saw McDonald's was open. And that's a miracle in and of itself. It was open past 8. And thank you, COVID. And so we get in line, and we order at the speaker. Then we drive through the window, and the guy says, "Don't worry, the person before you has paid for your meal." I'm like, no kidding. He's like, yeah, I just wanted to kind of just take care of your meal. I'm like, well, I ordered Ethan something. Now I'm thinking I should have ordered something now. And immediately I said, well, I'll take care of the person behind me. And then I panicked for a second because I'm like, let me check the mirror, because for all I knew, Kalamazoo Central's basketball team was behind me in like a bus, and they all ordered at once. And so I'm like, okay, just the family, we're good. And so I'm like, so I don't know how long that little chain went. Who knows? It could have went for a while. It could have ended with people behind us. But it was one of those little fun moments of you get up to the window and somebody just decided to bless you with a meal. Someone bought our chicken nuggets that night. What would have been really weird is to purchase the chicken nuggets after they've been purchased. To argue with the person saying, okay, they paid for all of it, yes, I have to give you something. Let me give you a couple bucks just in case they didn't cover it. It sounds ridiculous, it sounds silly, but in reality, when you look at the cross and you look that 2,000 years ago, a price was paid, and it was paid in full. All we have to do is take that which Jesus did and to trust in it and live in it. I mean, it's as simple as the McDonald's story. All I had to do was take what was given, take what was paid for, and just enjoy and just live in that. And I think so often that we look at the cross, and sometimes we've been in church so often or so many times that we have forgotten maybe how wonderful, how beautiful, how powerful the cross really is to all of us. See, this is our invitation to Good Friday, is to look at what Jesus did and to look at the cross and to gaze at it and to begin to take it in and to do exactly what we needed to do, is just trust in it and then live in it, knowing that you don't have to add to it. You don't have to add to the cross. You don't have to add to it with good works. Should you be doing good works? Of course you ought to be doing good works, but that's not what saves us. We're saved by the redeeming power of Jesus. And you don't have to add. You don't have to throw anything into it. Because by looking at the cross, and what I love about the cross, is the cross proves that you and I matter to God. I've heard that over and over in counseling sessions, years of doing youth ministry. Pastor, do you think I matter to God? Do I matter to God? Does God even know about me? You don't have to look any further than to look at the cross. I love talking about the cross. I love having conversations about the cross. I love that we shouldn't ever sanitize the cross. We should never look at it and just try to clean it up to make it more presentable, because the rugged, bloody look of the cross should really capture our hearts and remind us of how powerful it really is. Years ago, I remember talking about the letter X. The letter X is an amazing letter. It's the 24th letter of the alphabet, and you see the letter X really everywhere you go. It's one of the most commonly utilized letters that go across just simple words but are utilized in numbers of things. For example, I can go in my living room, I can see an X box right there. Or if I've gone to the bank to sign something, many times they will put in X next to where I need to sign. It's one of the most used letters. In fact, the letter X represents a chromosome. It represents a multiplication process. In fact, if you are Captain Jack Sparrow, then X marks the spot wherever the treasure is at. What I love about the letter X is just used in numbers of ways. For example, the Roman numeral 10 is the letter X. If you've ever gotten a letter passed to you by somebody in your class and they put next to their name an X, do you know what X means? It's a kiss, not a hug. If you got just an O, then they're like, okay, that's great. But a kiss meant something completely different. In the Middle Ages, when most people were, they couldn't read, they were illiterate, and so whenever they signed a document, what they would do is they would put a letter X and they would kiss the document, recognizing that they're showing good faith and honesty. In physics, the letter X is a spring stretch or a compression. In math, X stands for the unknown variable that you are trying to figure out, and judging by my algebra grades back in the day, that X was always unknown to me, completely, utterly unknown. Thank you for the amens. But what my favorite is X is the same as the Greek letter chi, which stands for Christ. In fact, in many religious documents and ancient documents, if you saw the letter X, it actually was the letter chi, which represented Jesus. It was years ago that it was in England that they started taking the word Christmas and they made it into Xmas. And then I grew up hearing that's how they take Jesus out of Christmas. They take Christ out of Christmas. If you go to Frankenmuth, the word Christ is all in capitals. It's Christmas. But what they did in England was they felt like Christmas was getting a little bland and they were losing out on the focus of Jesus. And so they put the letter X in place of Christ to not take away Jesus, but to put the emphasis so they can see and know Jesus is the meaning of the season. X itself, what I love is X is a cross, two intersecting lines. And if we were real about the cross, we would recognize that of all the symbols in the world, the cross should be perhaps the most recognizable symbol. Because when you see a cross, you know exactly what you are seeing. Whether you see it on a building, on a pendant around somebody's neck, you see it as a tattoo, you see it as an emoji, you know exactly what it is. That's the cross. And it is the most recognizable and perhaps the most misunderstood symbols that is known to man. And so that's why I say it is crucial for us to have a clear understanding of what the cross is and what it means. It is crucial for us to have a clear understanding of what the cross is and what it means. It is crucial. Someone's like, man, this guy's skipping right now. It is crucial for us to have a clear understanding of what the cross is and what it means. If you got it, say it. It is crucial for us to have a clear understanding of what the cross is and what it means. It's crucial. Now, in fact, the word crucial comes from the word cross. Did you know that? The word crucial comes from the word cross. It comes from the Latin word crux, for which we get the word, wait for it, crux. So we get two words, the crux and crucial, which are two English words, come from the same Latin word, which comes from the cross. The crux is this. It's the decisive or the most important point, or it's a point of difficulty. If you ever rock climb with Ethan and myself, you'll hear us talk about the crux of a route. What does that mean? It's the hardest, most difficult part of the route. Because I understand this, that the cross is the crux of Christianity. It is the place of decision. It is the most important point, and many times it's the point of difficulty. But if we don't get the cross right, we don't get the crux of Christianity, and we misunderstand Jesus and his mission. The cross is it all. Matthew 28, verse 28 says this, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Right there, Jesus lays it out, that the Son of Man didn't come to be served. He came to serve you. He came to serve me and to give his life as a ransom for many. He's talking about the cross. And so there are three things that I want you to know about the cross here on Good Friday service. Three things I want you to understand. If you're a note taker, I'm a note taker. I want you to write down three words for me. First word is the simple word vicarious. Vicarious. The cross was vicarious. The word vicarious means to be in place of, to act or to do for another. When my wife and I were in student ministry, we used to talk about parents who are living vicariously through their students. Like they bought their student that they're just living vicariously through them until we had kids, and all of a sudden we are buying, okay, I won't say we, I am buying toys for my children that I wish I would have had when I was their age. And so I would say this, I don't think I ever bought age-appropriate stuff for my kids. I bought stuff that I wanted to play with that they would ultimately grow in there, and I made up the excuse it was for the kids. I think all of us parents have done things vicariously through our kids. But the cross, I think of vicarious, in place of, acting, doing for another. So when we talk about the cross, we're talking about Jesus doing something on our behalf. What are we talking about? Paul talks about it in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. I love the Message paraphrase. In Christ, God put wrong on him who never did anything wrong, so that we could be put right with God. I love that. He became sin who knew no sin. Something was placed upon him, and it was that sin. It was that thing that separated us. This is what Romans chapter 6, verse 23 talks about when it says the wages of sin is, anybody know it? Death. The wages of sin is death. What is this death? Sin brings deadness. And in fact, the most accurate way to say it, sin brings separation from God. And so when we see the physical anguish of Jesus on the cross, we just don't see just physical anguish. We actually see the separation and the pain that it brought Jesus. That's why we read in Matthew chapter 7, verse 46, we see Jesus. We actually have it written out in two different languages. It says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus in this moment, he is crying out to God. But this is what I think is so peculiar about this verse, because if you have studied your scriptures, and I have studied it, I've got my degree in it, I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe this is the only time that Jesus addresses the Father and doesn't call him the Father. What does he call him? My God. Could it be in this moment that as the sin of the world is placed upon his shoulders, God did not abandon him. God does not abandon us. God never abandons us. But in this moment, Jesus in his flesh feels a bit of a separation. Why? Because all of a sudden he experiences something that he has not experienced, because he's perfect in every way. The sin placed upon his shoulders, and in this moment of feeling separated, he says, my God, why am I forsaken? And he did this because he loves us. In fact, we used to sing it this way back in the day, back in the 80s. He paid a debt that he did not owe, and I owed a debt that I could not pay. It was vicarious. Did something in place for us. But I love that it wasn't just vicarious, but write down this word. It was voluntary. It wasn't just vicarious, it was voluntary. It says this in Matthew chapter 27, verse 39 through 44, and those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, wagging their heads and saying, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. So also the chief priests within the scribes and elders mocking him, saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he desires him. For he said, I am the Son of God, and the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. People are jeering. People are mocking him. People are cutting into him, so to speak, with their words, saying, come on, if you've got this, if you are the Son of God, if you are God himself, come down from that cross. But the reason why he stayed on the cross is because he was the Christ. He could have come down. He could have called angels. Do you remember when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness? And even Satan himself said, you could command angels. You could command this and that. You could call the powers to come down. And Jesus stayed there. It was voluntary. John chapter 10, verse 18 says this, no one takes it from me. I lay my life down of my own accord. The New Living Translation, no one can take my life from me. I sacrifice it voluntarily. For I have the authority to lay it down when I want to and also to take it up again. For this is what my Father has commanded. It's voluntary. He chose to lay down his life for you and me. It wasn't nails that held him onto the cross. It was love. I think people say, it was our sin that held him. It wasn't the sin that held him to the cross. It was his love for you and me that he voluntarily laid down his life. Do you remember the Garden of Gethsemane? I've been to Gethsemane, and you're just kind of in awe of this moment of seeing these trees that have been around for years upon years upon years, thinking this is the place where Jesus in his flesh was saying, God, if it's possible, let somebody else do it. Let there be some other way to do this. But you know what, God? It doesn't matter, because what does matter is I choose to do your will and your will alone. It was voluntary. So it's vicarious, it's voluntary. But last and certainly not least, it was victorious. It was victorious. I love the victory that we see on the cross. What did the cross do? Colossians chapter 2, verse 14. The cross canceled the record of debt that stood against humanity. According to that same scripture, the cross disarmed demonic powers and authorities. According to 1 Peter 2:24, on the cross, Jesus bore our sins in his body so that we might die to death and sin. Galatians 3:13, it was on the cross that Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law. And according to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 54 through 55, that through the cross and the resurrection of Jesus, death has been swallowed up in victory. When we look at the cross, and this is what makes us different maybe from any other religion, is because other religions can recognize when their prophets, when their main person has passed away, but you can still find them in their tombs. What we celebrate is a victory that took place on that day. And when we celebrate that day, we celebrate that moment, we celebrate it with a greater hope, because we know that 3 days later he would rise again. The cross accumulated victory, and it came with simple words that were just simply this: it is, say it with me, finished. In the Greek, it's tetelestai. It is finished. It's done. It began with X and it ended with X. Began with Jesus being born as pure, whole, innocent, and he went to the cross in that same manner. We can't stop talking about the cross. We can't stop preaching about the cross. Please don't ever, ever, ever do away with the idea that we don't need the cross anymore, because I feel like every day I wake up, I need the cross fresh and anew every single day. We can't stop talking about the cross. I wrote it this way: a Bible without a cross is a Bible without a climax, a Bible without an ending. It's a Bible without a solution, and it's a Bible without hope. We need the cross. From the downward spiral of Genesis chapter 3, when sin came in, we needed the cross. Because it's at the cross that the new Adam, the new Abraham, the new Moses, the new David arose to create new humanity, new family, and new kingdom. And that's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 that he decided to know nothing except Jesus and Jesus crucified. I love that. Paul, of all the things, the resume that Paul had, people have studied Paul, and people have said Paul had next to it basically a double doctorate. Paul educated, Paul talented, Paul gifted, and Paul says, you know what, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I know Jesus and Jesus crucified. The cross was vicarious. He did for us what we could not do for ourselves. It was voluntary. He laid down his life for you and me, and it was victorious. It won a victory that we could not win. And if you had any doubts concerning the love of God, I challenge you, look to the cross. If you ever have any doubts, I had someone write me the other day, wanted to talk to me about how angry God is with humanity. And I'm like, dude, you need to look at the cross. You need to look at the cross. God forbid that we wrap our heads around a different theology that steers us away from the cross. We will never, ever, ever get away from the cross. There's a video that I want to show you in a second. And it's a video that I came across lying in bed, and for some reason I torture myself at night by watching videos that make me cry. And then I have to go through like 20 minutes of ones that will make me laugh. And I watch a lot of videos about servicemen coming home to see their family. You're like, why would you do that at night? I don't know. Maybe I just need a good cry. And I came across this fascinating video that I thought today would be an absolutely phenomenal day to show it. And let me set it up for you. This boy had not seen his dad in 10 months. His dad had been deployed. And he was supposed to do something for his martial arts studio. And the something was fighting blindfold. And so what they did was they set the video up, and he's going to fight blindfolded. And as soon as they put the blindfold on, his sensei steps out of the way, and his dad comes into the room and steps into the sensei's place. And the boy is told to start fighting, and he begins to fight. He begins to fight until he hears a voice. Would you watch this?
9-year-old Lucas Estorino thought he was sparring with his instructor when someone else stepped onto the mat.
Keep your gloves up, Shib. Keep your hands up.
That voice, that nickname, only his dad would know.
Come on, Shib.
Stopping Shib in his tracks.
Come on. Is that what we got?
Daddy?
That hug after 10 months apart, while his father, Staff Sergeant Rob Sestorino of the Tennessee National Guard, was deployed in Syria.
You were such a big boy when I was going. I'm so proud of you.
9-year-old Lucas Estorino.
Yeah, please don't make us watch that again. But the reason why I wanted to show that to you, I'm all teared up here, is because that's you and me. Because there's a part of us that wants to do things ourselves. And there are times that God just wants us to stop fighting him and just to trust him with our lives. But for some reason we keep fighting. We keep fighting. We want to do things ourselves. We want to live for our own way. We want to do our own thing. We want to follow our own path. We want to do it all ourselves. And I wonder if we could just stop fighting God. Stop fighting him, because he's calling our voice. Did you hear Dad just say? He kept saying Shib. That was his nickname, Shib. And the boy would pause. No, I got to keep fighting. No, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And he says Shib. He stops again. And you can tell he's like, what do I do? That can't be who I think it is. And he keeps fighting. One more time, Shib. And he stops. And he begins to pull off the thing that he's been fighting with. And he begins to realize there is a voice that's calling him home. And that voice is calling us. Because when we look at the cross, we've got to strip off the things that we've been fighting with, the things that we've been clinging to, the things that we've been operating with, knowing that we don't need the things that we think are going to keep us going and keeping us happy and keep us whole. We don't need those things as much as we need Jesus. And he is the one that is calling us home. So when you look at the cross, we can recognize that we don't have to fight with God any longer. We never had to fight with him to begin with. All we had to do is answer the call. He's calling us today. He's calling you and he's calling me. God, help us if we've given any other message. God isn't calling just a couple, just a select few. He calls all. The scripture says he wills that none would perish. And I recognize that nights like tonight many times it's a night for people to come that maybe know Christ. Maybe they're in a relationship with God. But I never want to go without an opportunity during Easter weekend to make sure I give you a chance to respond to the Father. Because maybe you're watching today, and maybe online you're watching this, and you're watching that boy, and you're realizing you are that boy, fighting God, struggling, feeling like you've got to do this life the way that you've always known it, instead of just stopping what you're doing and being embraced by the Father. I don't know if you heard what the Father said. The Father kept saying, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Some of you are going to go home and watch it tonight and then cry all over again. But I love it. I love you. I am so proud of you. God has welcomed you here, not to beat on you. He's welcomed you here, and that's what he wants to whisper in your heart as I love you. I'm proud of you. Bow your heads with me.